You know, when we think about getting ready for a disaster, we usually picture this big, top-down national plan, right? But what if that's not the best way? What if a much more local approach is actually the key to keeping us all safe? Well, today, we're going to dive into some really fascinating research that completely flips that old idea on its head.
All right, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about why this is so important. Then, we're going to expose a major flaw in the way we usually plan for disasters and look at some pretty compelling visual proof. And finally, we'll get into a new, smarter solution and see how it can help us all build stronger, more resilient communities.
So, let's just start with the basics. What is the core problem we're really trying to solve here?
Well, this is it. When a disaster hits, it's not just about buildings falling down. We're talking about economies getting completely wiped out, environments being devastated for years, and just lives and communities being turned completely upside down. The ripple effects are massive.
Okay, so how do we typically prepare for something so huge? Well, this is where we hit a bit of a snag in the traditional way of thinking.
So the standard playbook has always been this one-size-fits-all national plan. You create one big strategy and just apply it everywhere. But this research, it makes a powerful case for something totally different, a tailored regional approach. And that idea is really at the heart of everything we're talking about today. And look, this isn't just a hunch. The researchers didn't just guess that this would be a better way. They actually dug into the data. And honestly, what they found is pretty eye-opening. So, what they did was simple but brilliant. They looked at where different disasters actually happen. Are the risks spread out pretty evenly across the country, making a national plan logical? Or are they concentrated in specific hotspots?
And boom, this map just says it all. You really don't need to be a data scientist to see what's going on. Those darker areas show where a certain type of disaster happens way more often. It is crystal clear that the risk is not the same everywhere. What's a huge constant threat in one part of the country is barely a blip on the radar somewhere else.
And just to drive the point home, here it is again with a different set of disaster data. The pattern is just undeniable. Trying to use a single, national plan for this kind of reality, well, it's not just inefficient, it's dangerous. You end up wasting resources where they're not needed and leaving other communities totally exposed.
Okay, so if the problem is regional, it just makes sense that the solution has to be regional too. And this is where the research gives us a really clear path forward.
The key phrase to remember here is integrated disaster management. This is a whole new way of thinking. Instead of having a separate plan for fires, another for floods, and another for earthquakes, you create one holistic strategy that looks at all the potential risks a specific region faces together.
And the study points to these 4 disaster types, in particular, as prime examples of why we need this regional approach. Things like forest fires or landslides are so incredibly localized that a big, generic national plan just isn't going to cut it.
So, the research lays out a pretty straightforward 3-step game plan. First, you have to completely restructure disaster plans from the ground up with a regional focus. Second, and this is crucial, you get neighboring regions to work together, because we all know disasters don't stop at county lines. And third, you base everything on a really thorough multi-risk assessment so you know exactly what you're up against.
So what does all of this actually mean for us, in our towns and cities? Let's talk about the real-world impact of making this kind of shift.
At the end of the day, it's about one thing: being more effective. The research is clear that this regional approach doesn't just work better for the specific area it's designed for, it actually creates this positive ripple effect of safety for everyone around it. I mean, the benefits just stack up. You get more effective management, which is great. You get stronger cooperation between communities. You're using money and resources in a much smarter way. And what does that all add up to? Safer communities. Communities that can actually weather the storm, whatever it may be.
So that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is your own community just preparing for the one disaster you always expect, or is it truly preparing for all the risks it might face? This research isn't just an academic paper, it's a real wake-up call for every single one of us.